Hello everyone and welcome. In this video I'm going to talk about the counter, which is a data type from the collections module. Now the collections module is basically a module that contains different data types, which are basically variations of the normal data types that already exist. So for example, lists, dictionaries, tuples, etc., but optimized in order to make it easier to use them. So for example, there's a variation of the tuple called named tuple. There are variations of the dictionary called ordered dictionary in default dictionary, and there's the counter. Now the first thing to do is to import it from the collections module. So from collections, import counter with a capital C like that. Now it's kind of hard to explain exactly what a counter is, so I'm just going to create one. So counter equals counter, and then I'm going to give you a few examples. So in here, you can put basically any data type you want. So string, integer, lists, tuples, dictionaries, etc. Now I'm just going to put a string in here, Tommy. And now I'm going to print counter so that you can see what it looks like. So print counter. And now if I run this code, this is going to give me a counter object with a dictionary inside, and then inside of this dictionary I'm going to get the amount of occurrences of each element of my string. So for example, M appears twice, T appears once, O appears once, and Y appears once. Now if you try to access an element of the counter that doesn't exist, so for example if you write for example A doesn't exist and you try to print that, this is going to return 0, right? Because that's the number of occurrences of that element since it doesn't exist. Now, you can also put positional arguments inside of a counter. So let me just create another counter. This is going to be called count, and now counter. And then in here, I'm going to put pizza equals 4, for example. And now I'm going to print count like that. And this is just going to give me the same thing. So the number of occurrences of pizza. And now if instead of this, you print a tuple, so tuple with count dot elements like that, and you run this. This is going to give you a tuple with the string pizza repeated 4 times, which is the number I put in here. Now let me just delete all this. Now you can get the most common element, so the element with the most occurrences, with the dot most common method. So print counter dot most common, and then in here you would put the number of elements you want. So I'm going to put 1 in there just because I want the first most common element, and this is going to give me a tuple with that element, so M, and then the number of occurrences. And now you can add elements too using the dot update method. So you would write, for example, counter dot update, and then string, for example, M. And now let's just print counter in here. And now if I run this, this is going to give me the counter object, but then M is going to have the value of 3 because I added it with the update method. And you can also subtract elements using the subtract method. So counter dot subtract. And now let's subtract the O, for example. And now if I run this, you can see that O is now equal to 0. And if you want to know the total amount of elements in your counter, you can use the total method. So for example, counter dot total. And now if you run this, this is going to give you all of the characters present in your counter. And lastly, to empty your counter, you can just use counter dot clear. And now if you print this, this is going to give you 0 because there are no elements in your counter. And if you print your counter, this is just going to return an empty counter. Now I think that's all for the counter methods. Now let me just create another counter. So right below here, it's going to be called C. It's going to be equal to counter, and it's going to have Mary inside. So Mary. And let me just delete this so that we don't have an empty counter. And now I can add these two counters using the plus sign. So for example, plus C, so one counter plus the other, and this is going to give me the addition of both counters. So M is now going to be 4, Y is going to be 2, T is going to be 1, A is going to be 1, and R is going to be 1. And I can also subtract them. So using the hyphen, this is going to give me the subtraction. So now there's only 2 occurrences for M and 1 for T. And now you can intersect them using the AND operator. So like that. And this is going to give you only the elements that appear in both counters and also the amount of occurrences in which that happens. And finally, you can unite them using this this upright slash that I don't know what's called, um, but this is basically going to print all of the elements in all the counter in all of the counter objects. So it's basically the same thing as just adding them together. Okay, so that's it for this video. I hope it was easy to understand. I'll see you in the next one.